All right, thank you, Richard, for that introduction. It's a great pleasure to be here this morning. As I see all of the names that are on the tables, I would venture to guess that there's not one agency, organization, or company in this room that I have not had the opportunity to work on a project for. I get asked all the time, what do I do for a living? At first glance, you would think that that would be easy to describe what a land use planner does. But it's a lot more difficult than you might think. Impossible if you're trying to describe it in only a few sentences. This is especially the case if the person you're talking to doesn't understand how projects are permitted in California or is unfamiliar with Kern County. So my first job out of college was for the city of San Jose as a policy analyst for a city council member. I distinctly remember thinking at the time, why would anybody ever want to work for a county? There's never anything to do. Then, of course, I came to Kern. Speaking of, I would not be in Kern County today if it were not for energy production. Better yet, I would not even live in California. My family moved to California from Colorado in 1997 when my father took a job with one of our local oil-producing companies. My family is a great example of the indirect benefits that this region and that this state receive as a result of the efforts of every single person in this room. I attended and earned my degree from California State University School. I've had the pleasure of working for local government ever since for a number of different cities and jurisdictions. My brother earned his PhD from UCLA. For a time, he worked for LA County Public Health. And my sister attended and graduated at California University. Has been a high school teacher for schools in Kern, San Luis Obispo, and Riverside counties. All three of us have been active, productive members of our community. And again, we would not be here if it wasn't not for energy production. My point is, the exponential indirect benefits that result from California's energy production links all of our citizens together. They continually build upon themselves from person to person to the point that they really become immeasurable. As Richard had said, today marks the 11th annual Kern County Energy Summit. Our county has a long and successful history of energy production, so much so that it is embedded in the fabric of our communities. For the past 12 years, I've worked for the county of Kern. During that time, my department has changed its name on 3 separate occasions. When I first started working for the department, we were simply known as the Planning Department. After a couple years, we became the Planning and Community Development Department. More recently, we are now known as the Planning and Natural Resources Department. The inclusion of natural resources in the department's name is more than symbolic. I look at it as a commitment. Over the past few years, we've been able to accomplish many of our energy goals that we have set out to achieve together. We now have permitted over 10,000 megawatts of renewable energy. Our solar and wind facilities are some of the largest in the world. Energy storage and waste-to-energy projects will soon become standard instead of unique. And perhaps the most challenging permitting environment ever, we were able to complete the processing of a new oil and gas ordinance. Just a few months ago, we received the 2017 Challenge Merit Award from CSAC, the California State Association of Counties, for our electronic-based permitting system for energy projects that was established specifically to implement that oil and gas ordinance. Since its adoption, we've been able to issue over 2,600 permits through that system. From a purely staff perspective, I have a theory as to why the county has seen such great success in this industry over the past few years. However, to best explain this theory of mine, I need to tell you a personal story. For those of you who know me know that I've been a soccer player my entire life. Started playing when I was a child. I played through high school and in college at San Jose State. I continue to play and coach weekly in Bakersfield as part of the youth and adult leagues that we can find around this town. I've always considered my soccer career to be rather successful. I remember one practice, however, growing up. I was about 10 years old. We were working on trying to score off of a corner kick. My coach called me over. He said, when you're in the game, right before we take our corner kick, I want you to elbow the kid, you're guarding you, right in the gut. Nobody will know. Kid will be surprised. He'll go down. You'll be wide open for the goal. So, of course, the next game, the opportunity presented itself. I was being guarded by a kid who was blonde. I mean, this is how vividly I remember this still. He was wearing a red and white jersey. I did exactly what I was told. Right before the kick, just gave a little elbow, right in the stomach. He, of course, went down. Ball sailed right over my head. No scoring opportunity. Now, the kid immediately came up to me afterward and he asked, why did you do that? I ignored him and continued to play. Now, in all of my years of playing, I never, ever felt as bad as I did after that game. That single play has and has continued to be a defining moment in my life. Why? Well, it's because from that moment on, I knew exactly what kind of soccer player I was never, ever going to be. By knowing what you are not, you eliminate half the things that you need to worry about. This allows you to better focus on the things you want to become and the things that really deserve your attention. That is my theory as to why the County of Kern has been so successful when it comes to energy production. The competitive advantage in Kern County is that from a permitting and processing perspective, we have a good understanding who we are not, and we have a good understanding who we do not want to become. We're not going to operate as an agency that is difficult to communicate with, difficult to meet with, or difficult to get answers from. We are not going to let other agencies, we're not going to let other jurisdictions decide what is best for our communities or for our citizens. And we are not going to shortcut any appropriate environmental review or necessary mitigation to ensure the health, safety, and welfare of our residents. These are just a few of the examples of the subtle differences that I have noticed while working for this county. Those differences have served as the foundation by which all of our success has been built on. So those of you who know me also know that I'm a very visual person, and I prepared for you a representation of how the permitting process works. All right, I have this blue paper. This blue paper represents a project when it's first presented to me, my staff, to the County of Kern. Blue, small, that's what it is. This orange paper represents the project about halfway through the permitting process. It's always bigger than when it was first presented to staff, and in this case, it's even a different color. It would be hard-pressed to think of a single project in which I didn't receive the phone call, and many of you in this room have made the phone call. For those of you who are unaware, the phone call always starts out something like this. Hey, Craig, how's it going? So, what would happen if we slightly wanted to change our project? Finally, this somewhat smaller orange paper with stars represents the project in its final shape as it's being for its final consideration. Now, I joke about the phone call, but it is a real thing. It can paralyze the processing of a project if you let it, and I'm sure that you have stories of how this has happened to projects that you have been working on. If you think about it, the complexities of permitting and executing a project in California are mind-blowing. You need approval from upwards up to 1, 2, 10, maybe 15 agencies that have to give some sort of approval to let your project move forward or to operate. Design, it has to be efficient. You have to be able to build it. You have to have the parts to be able to maintain it, the infrastructure to get those parts to and from. When it comes to energy permitting, land ownership, funding, selling of your product, the energy output, you have to deal with hundreds upon thousands of different individuals. Adaptability. Can this project adapt to the changing demands of our state? It's no wonder that it always has to constantly change when you have to factor all of those things. Again, I'm not telling anybody in this room anything that you don't already know. What I am saying, however, is that in Kern County, those changes are somewhat anticipated, they are expected, and many times they are necessary to effectively process a project. At the end of the day, I am a land use planner, and the number one question I have to understand is, do these changes fundamentally change the underlying impacts of the project or its compatibility with the surrounding uses? If not, then we simply adjust and move forward. If so, then again, the answer is the same. We simply adjust, we address those impacts, and then again, we move forward. Knowing who you are not allows more freedom to concentrate on those aspects of a project that you can control. So in closing, I want to leave you with one more personal story. Relatives cannot visit my family without my father taking them out to the bluffs overlooking the oil fields. It's kind of like one of those required Murphy family field trips. When I am driving home from eastern Kern County, my children always ask me to take a detour along Oak Creek Road, Roseman Boulevard, or Bacchus Road because they want to see the solar fields and the wind turbines up close. The impact your industry has on the community and the state is more than what you bring or what you offer in energy production or property taxes. I would argue that it's the bedrock by which all industries are built on. What we can accomplish together is not only impressive, but I believe it is equally inspiring, and I am very proud to have been a small part of that overall success. Thank you.